Browns head coach Todd Monken is facing some heat for potentially starting Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. A lot of people are against it. They're
making. Shedeur said one thing he loved about Coach Monken was that Monken spoke life into him. Okay, said he believes in him. He didn't really have that relationship with Kevin Stefanski.
Everybody keeps pretending this is just a normal quarterback competition in Cleveland. It's not. The second Todd Monken started showing real belief in Shedeur Sanders, the entire energy around the Browns changed. Suddenly, national media started throwing out disrespectful predictions again. 5 wins, 6 wins, another disaster season, same old Browns. And somehow, every single conversation keeps circling back to one thing. People do not want Shedeur Sanders to succeed. That's what this really feels like now. Because if you actually listen to the criticism, a lot of it stops making football sense. Analysts keep talking about concerns and question marks, but then you look at the Browns roster and realize this team is not nearly as broken as people are acting like it is. The roster improved, the coaching energy changed, the offensive philosophy changed, the draft classes look promising, the weapons got better, the offensive line got addressed, and yet somehow the predictions are still acting like Cleveland is about to be one of the worst teams in football. Why?
Because Todd Monken was a guy that wanted to help develop Shedeur Sanders. Saw something in him, thought that they could very well develop Shedeur Sanders.
Because people still do not believe in Shedeur Sanders, and honestly, some people flat out don't even want to. That's why Todd Monken is suddenly catching heat, because the second reports started coming out that he actually likes what Shedeur brings to the offense, the anti-Shedeur crowd immediately started panicking. Now every conversation sounds the same. He's overhyped, he's not ready, he's only famous because of Deion. The Browns are making a mistake. It's becoming non-stop. Meanwhile, nobody wants to acknowledge how bad Cleveland's situation actually was last year.
He said that Monken brought a new vibe and a new energy to practice already, and you can see Shedeur was smiling while talking about that.
The Browns won 5 games in a season where literally everything that could go wrong went wrong. The offense looked dead. The energy looked dead. The creativity disappeared completely. There were games where fans could predict the play before the snap just based on personnel packages. Defenses were sitting on routes because nothing stressed them vertically. The offensive line got beat up. The quarterback room became chaos. And somehow, even through all that dysfunction, Cleveland still scratched out 5 wins. That matters, because now people are acting like this same franchise suddenly has 0 chance to improve even after major changes were made. That's the part that doesn't add up. Todd Monken walks into the building bringing fresh ideas, fresh energy, and an entirely different offensive mindset. Position coaches stay intact for development continuity. Young players from the previous draft classes now have another year to grow. New weapons get added. The offensive line gets attention in free agency. The tight end room becomes one of the most interesting groups in football. And yet national predictions still treat Cleveland like a hopeless disaster.
It's slap in the face. We got 5-12, okay, 5 wins in a season where Shedeur didn't get any reps. He was being completely sabotaged by his head coach.
That's why Browns fans are starting to feel like the hate is personal. Because if you really break this down logically, the reactions around Shedeur Sanders feel way more emotional than football-based. Even the articles criticizing Cleveland keep exposing the contradiction. One minute they admit the Browns improved their pass catchers, then they admit the protection should be better, then they admit the roster has more depth, then they admit the draft class looks strong. But somehow, after listing all those improvements, they still land on 5 wins. At some point, the math stops mathing.
Hoping Shedeur is the starter this year. I'm done watching. But regardless, I do think Monken brings the most out of the quarterbacks.
And the biggest reason people are skeptical is because they're assuming Shedeur Sanders cannot elevate the offense. That's the real conversation hiding underneath everything else. Because if people actually believed Shedeur was good, the outlook changes immediately. This is where it gets dangerous, because the Browns may finally have the exact kind of quarterback Todd Monken actually wants to coach. Not just physically, but mentally. A quarterback who processes quickly, plays with confidence, and isn't afraid of pressure moments. And that matters, because Monken's entire reputation is built around offensive aggression and adaptability. Last season, Cleveland looked scared offensively. Everything felt cautious, predictable, compressed. It was like the offense was trying not to lose instead of trying to attack defenses. And fans felt it every week. 10-yard ceilings on drives, conservative play calling, no rhythm, no explosive identity. Now compare that to what Shedeur brings stylistically. Quick release, accuracy, confidence throwing over the middle, willingness to attack timing windows, calmness under pressure, chemistry with tight ends, comfort operating in spread concepts while still handling structure. Those are things Monken can work with immediately. That's why some Browns fans are actually excited instead of terrified. And honestly, Earl's point during the radio discussion made a lot of sense too. He basically said people are acting like this roster suddenly forgot how to play football overnight. Before the collapse season, many analysts had Cleveland ranked as a top 15 roster in the NFL. Then one disastrous year happens, and suddenly everybody starts talking about the Browns like they're the worst team alive. That's recency bias, and sports media does this constantly. One bad season rewrites everything people said before. Fans start repeating national talking points instead of looking at context. Suddenly, players who were respected 2 years ago become washed. Coaches who were respected become terrible. Young players lose all benefit of development curves. Everything becomes extreme, but football usually isn't that simple. Here's the part nobody is talking about. The Browns were actually competitive in multiple games despite the dysfunction. There were several losses that came down to late game execution, bad decisions, or situational failures. That's where coaching changes matter massively. Earl pointed out something really important during that conversation. He said Todd Monken alone might be worth 2 extra wins simply because of better decision-making in situational football. And honestly, that's believable. Good coaching flips close games, especially in today's NFL where so many matchups come down to one possession. So if Cleveland won 5 games during complete offensive dysfunction, why is it impossible to imagine them winning 8 or 9 with improved quarterback play, better energy, and more offensive flexibility? That's the question nobody seems comfortable answering honestly. Instead, people keep obsessing over the idea that Shedeur Sanders is somehow the problem before he's even fully played. And let's be honest here, part of that absolutely comes from the Deion Sanders factor, because Shedeur is never going to get treated like a normal quarterback. Every practice gets analyzed differently. Every throw becomes content online. Every report turns into a debate about hype versus reality. Some people already decided they dislike the entire Sanders brand, regardless of what happens on the field. That's real. So when Todd Monken starts showing confidence in Shedeur, critics instantly treat it like favoritism or delusion instead of evaluating the football side objectively. But Monken isn't stupid. This is a coach with years of offensive experience. He understands quarterback traits. He understands what works in modern offenses. And if he believes Shedeur gives Cleveland the best chance to maximize the offense long term, that opinion carries weight whether national media likes it or not, especially because the Browns offense suddenly has flexibility now. The tight end room looks dangerous, the wide receiver room has more speed and depth, the running back room looks deeper. Young players are developing, and the biggest thing, the offense finally feels like it's building toward an identity again. That changes everything for a quarterback, because young quarterbacks fail all the time when organizations throw them into broken systems with no structure, but when the supporting cast makes sense, development speeds up dramatically. That's why some Browns fans are optimistic despite all the negativity. They're looking at the actual football situation instead of just headlines. And honestly, the disrespect towards Shedeur has gotten weird lately. People are talking about him like he can't play at all. Meanwhile, every time you actually watch the tape, you see a quarterback who consistently handled pressure, delivered accurate throws, and kept producing despite chaos around him. Is he perfect? No, but the conversation around him feels completely disconnected from reality sometimes. This is where young players usually make a mistake. They start listening to outside noise instead of trusting their own game. They try too hard to prove critics wrong immediately. They force things. They press. They lose rhythm trying to win arguments instead of football games. That's why Monken's support matters so much. If Shedeur feels the coaching staff genuinely believes in him, that changes his confidence level instantly. Young quarterbacks need stability. They need clarity. They need coaches who understand how to build around strengths instead of constantly focusing on weaknesses. And honestly, Cleveland hasn't had enough of that at quarterback over the years. Too often, the Browns felt like an organization constantly resetting instead of developing. That's why this moment matters bigger than one season prediction. Because if Monken actually commits to Shedeur and builds the offense around modern concepts that fit him, Cleveland could finally break the cycle that has haunted the franchise for decades. And that possibility scares people more than they want to admit, because the NFL world has gotten comfortable laughing at Cleveland quarterback situations. The Browns became a punchline for so long that many people almost don't know how to react when there's actual potential for stability. So they default back to negativity. 5-win predictions, growing pains, too many questions, same recycled narratives over and over. But if you really look deeper, this roster has enough talent to surprise people. Myles Garrett still changes games defensively, the offensive weapons improved, the coaching energy improved, young players are ascending, the tight end room might become elite, the offensive philosophy should become more aggressive, and if Shedeur stabilizes the quarterback position even moderately, the ceiling changes dramatically. That's why the backlash around Todd Monken feels so exaggerated. exaggerated right now, because deep down, critics know that if Shedeur actually works in Cleveland, a lot of people are going to look very wrong, and sports media hates being wrong about quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks they already dismissed publicly. So instead of waiting to see development naturally happen, people rush to bury the possibility before it starts. That way, if Shedeur struggles, they can say, "See, we told you." And if he succeeds, they'll just pivot the narrative later. That cycle happens constantly in sports, but Browns fans are starting to push back harder now because they're tired of hearing the same lazy narratives repeated nationally. Earl even pointed out how fans start regurgitating opinions they hear elsewhere instead of forming their own evaluations. That's true too. One national article says the Browns are doomed, and suddenly people repeat it like gospel without looking at actual context. But context matters. This team was not as talent poor as people claim. The biggest issue was dysfunction, energy, identity, offensive creativity, quarterback instability. Those things kill seasons faster than raw talent deficiencies sometimes. And Todd Monken was brought in specifically to fix those problems. So if he believes Shedeur Sanders can help lead that turnaround, maybe people should actually pay attention before dismissing it automatically. Because what if the Browns finally got this right? What if the aggressive quarterback who plays with confidence actually fits this city perfectly? What if the offensive structure finally creates rhythm instead of chaos? What if the young weapons develop faster than expected? What if Monken's coaching genuinely flips close losses into wins? Suddenly, those 5-win predictions start looking ridiculous. And maybe that's why the reaction around Shedeur feels so emotional right now. Because people don't just dislike the possibility of him succeeding individually, they dislike what it would mean symbolically. It would mean Cleveland finally escaped the quarterback curse narrative. It would mean Deion Sanders' son proved people wrong on the biggest stage. It would mean Todd Monken saw something everyone else ignored. And it would mean the NFL media spent months disrespecting a situation they didn't fully understand. That's why this season feels bigger than football already. Every Shedeur throw is going to become evidence for one side or the other. Every Monken decision will get analyzed under a microscope. Every Browns win or loss becomes another argument in the debate. But one thing is already obvious. The hate around Shedeur Sanders is very real. And the second Todd Monken started looking like a coach willing to ride with him, that hate got even louder.